When you get an outbrief from a mishap report, like take a breath and pull your emotion out of it. The reason we do these reports is to learn and to make ourselves better and to not repeat the mistakes of the men and women that went before us and to be a better warfighter.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilot, welcome back to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka. I'm glad you're here with me today. And my guest is a gentleman named Patrick Westmoreland. And Patrick and I are talking about aviation mishaps. And he is a mishap investigator. He has been a board president on multiple mishaps. And we talk all about the process of what happens when an aircraft crashes and how to investigate this aircraft crash. And to me, it's one of the most interesting things. I've gotten a chance to participate in that back in my Navy life. And I think that it is very interesting. It's a very difficult topic to discuss, but also something that I think we should all think about and how to continually make ourselves better. So that's what we're talking about today. So let's enjoy it, all right? Sit back, relax. Let's get ready for Pushback. Hey, pilot, did you just get a new conditional job offer? Are you getting out of the military and going to move your family across the country? Are you going to move in base somewhere, or are you going to go out to find that second home that you've been looking for? Well, I want you to stop right now, pick up the phone, and call Marty and the team at Trident Home Loans. It's an organization that's run by pilots. They understand pilot pay. They understand contracts. They understand military. They have the best VA loans in the United States. Marty and his team have been doing mortgages for years. They've been doing my mortgages for years. I trust him and his team more than any other organization. I challenge you to get a better deal anywhere else. Go ahead, reach out, get a mortgage quote, and then call Marty and his team. They will walk you through the process and show you how competitive their rates are. So go right now, tridenthomeloans.com, and check them out. All right, I've got Patrick Westmoreland with me. Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm great, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm good, dude. Let's talk some aviation safety today. And I would love if you would start off just telling the pilot that's listening a little bit about yourself and your credentials and kind of where you stand.
Okay. I'm still an active duty member. I've been a board president or an investigating officer for about a dozen mishaps at this point. I've been in multiple branches of the military. I have deployed actually with the Navy, the Marines. It's been a great 20 plus year career. And I am qualified at rotary, fixed wing, and unmanned aviation aircraft.
Do you do mishap investigations for unmanned aircraft?
I have been fortunate to dodge that bullet.
Yeah. Seems like a mess. And so what branch are you in right now?
I'm in the Air Force.
You're in the Air Force. And word on the street is you just picked up Colonel. Is that true?
That may or may not be true.
Oh, man. That's wild. All right. Well, God bless you. All right. So you started off your life flying. Did you go in the Navy? We have the School of Aviation Safety in Pensacola, and that's where we send all our people to get trained up as a safety officer. And then there's further evolutions down the line for crew resource management, aviation safety, and mishap investigation, all that stuff. What was your path like?
So my path was pretty standard. I became a pilot first. You spend the first few years really honing those skills. And then in the Army, you have different opportunities to be, instruct and do standard evaluation. You can do maintenance or you can do safety. Now, warrant officers, typically, they're forced to branch these things. As a real life officer, you can kind of come and go from those worlds. I super love the maintenance world. However, my passion has always been in safety. So the Combat Readiness Center down at Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is now Fort Novacell, that's where all safety happens down there. And we have air safety investigation courses, ground safety, CRM, you name it. It's just, when you go into ATARs, it's pages of classes for you to choose from.
So you go to the safety school, you get certified in that, and then how do you jump on? How do you get assigned? Like if a mishap happens, who's responsible for saying, "Hey, you're in charge of this thing"? Or do you start off as kind of an assistant and learn the ropes? I mean, or do you just go to the head of the class and you're going to be a board president to do this investigation?
And that's a great question, Nick. Really, you go back to your unit and you're that unit safety guy. You're going to implement a flight safety program. You're going to ground safety. And God forbid there's a mishap in your unit. But if there is, you're going to be that initial board there, sequestering all the records and taking photos and waiting for those guys from the CRC to come up.
What's a CRC?
Oh, the Combat Readiness Center.
Okay.
So for Army Aviation, that's where all the board presidents and then the IO, which is also going to be called, the secretary, basically, they're going to come up and then they're going to pull board members in from the local brigade or, battalions and whatnot. So you'll get to do that. And as you progress through your career, if you, in my opinion, are fortunate enough to go to Fort Rucker and go to the Combat Readiness Center, you'll do some additional training to be a board president and all the things. You'll go do one, you'll observe, you'll help, you shadow, and then you'll do one. And then you will have, somebody coming and evaluating you. And they will actually take this to the general, and he's the one who signs you off.
Okay. And then, so walk me through the process. Like a mishap happens, there's an aircraft, something goes wrong with an aircraft, or somebody dies or something, God forbid, like that. What is the process from kind of soup to nuts? If I've never been there before, how would you talk me through it?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, the worst day ever, for a family, for a unit and everything else. So you got to be very sensitive when that phone rings, and it rings 24 hours a day. You'll get notified. You'll get on the road as quickly as possible because you want to get there. And then once you're there, there's really three main phases. You're going to collect all the evidence and do some initial analysis. That analysis may include boxing things up, shipping off black boxes, if you will, parts and pieces to the OEM, to the manufacturer. You'll have some industry reps who will come in who can help guide you through that process. Then you'll hit the second phase, and that's going to be your deliberations. So you've got all your information back. You've got all your evidence. And now you're going to lock yourself in a room with about a dozen other people. And it's like Thunderdome. Only one man's going to leave. And that's going to be the answer, because everyone's going to have a pet rock. They're going to be, it's the maintenance guys. It's always maintenance. It's the paperwork was wrong, and this is my world. So that's the worst thing. And you have to navigate and pull this jury together and have just one answer. And then we finalize the report and we do the outbrief.
Okay, cool. So 3 phases: gathering evidence, and then Thunderdome, and then presenting the evidence to the final admiral or general that's going to sign off on it. And then that will be set in stone as like, here's the report on the mishap. That's basically how it goes.
That's correct.
All right, cool. So let's talk about the evidence gathering part, because that that's the most like active part, right? That's where I've been in a handful of squadrons that have had mishaps, and I've lost a bunch of friends, and it's been, very sad. And I still think about them almost every single day. But when you have that mishap and you are going down the rabbit hole, the first thing you do is show up at the scene, right? Talk me through if it's in the water, it's a whole different thing. But if it's on the land, talk me through what you guys are doing and how you're gathering evidence and what you're looking for.
So fortunately, when you hit the ground, you're just going to hit that ground running. And most of the time you have that unit safety guy who's there, who's already started pulling some things in. So even before we leave, there's a drip, drip, drip of information starting to come in. When you do hit the ground, whether it's in the desert, it's on the water, or wherever you're going to. And I've done accidents in everywhere you can imagine. You just have to be open with your mindset and go, where is this thing? How do we get to it? What does it look like? And then just go do it. It's almost hard to explain, but the most important things is to preserve that evidence. And saltwater hates aircraft.
That's a good point.
The desert hates aircraft. And you got to understand that a helicopter crashes into the sands of the desert. First responders and all the helpful people have already been walking through your evidence for 3 days. So they're not doing you a lot of favors.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the first things, so if I'm in a squadron and a mishap happens, I'm the safety officer. The first thing I've got to do is sequester first I grab my mishap binder, right? And you start going through, you have a book, straight up a book, and it's got a checklist, and it's a big, big dang book. And you've got to get all the maintenance information on the aircraft first. Second is all the qualification documents and all the file folders and all the logbooks for the pilots that were involved in the air crew, right? You got to get you just assemble this huge stack of paperwork, and everybody in the squadron kind of has a job. And then you've also got to, at the same time, go out there. Is it a combat situation or is it a training situation? Can you get out there? Can you not get out there? Are there parts floating in the water? Are there parts not floating in the water? Are they, was it up super? I think about hey, the guy ejects at, I don't know, 30,000 feet, and all of a sudden, or took kind of a SAM or something and broke up in flight. Then you have a huge area to cover, right? That's wild. Talk to me about being on scene and how to figure out, if you don't know why it crashed, what kind of things are you looking for? What are telltale signs, and what are things that are of interest to you guys?
Yeah, Nick, and you brought up some really interesting scenarios right there, from ejection at high altitude to maybe breaking up and coming down. No two are the same ever. And I've literally walked out to a Class A helicopter that came down in the sod next to a runway. Oof. Less than 1/10 of a mile behind, the fire department there. And you're just like, it's a comedy of errors. And you're like, what happened here? And it's perfectly fine. It's just sitting there. But they're so complex. You dinged certain parts and you're already north of $1 million.
Yeah.
Versus a big smoking hole. So like I was saying earlier, you just have to be wide open in the mind and just show up and go, what am I dealing with? It's very hard on your first ones because you have expectations. And then when they don't meet those, you have to step back and go, what am I looking at? So is it a deep smoking hole? Is it a long field worth of parts and pieces, or is it underwater? And some of the first things I look for personally is I'll look at a scene, and then I look to see, where are the cameras? Every airfield has cameras, military, civilian, everywhere's got a camera. And the guys on the ground always have cameras. So even though they're not supposed to on flight lines and things like that, you put that out there, says no one's going to get in trouble, but I'd love to see pictures from that night, and I'll get an inbox full of them. And so now I've got a little bit of an idea what's going on.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And you said earlier that airplanes hate salt water. I remember there was a mishap many moons ago where two helicopters ran into each other over water, and the Navy has, so if you have a mishap in the water and the Navy deems it important to retrieve those aircraft to determine why they crashed, they actually have a crew with a specially made ship that can go anywhere in the world and go down to some of the deepest depths of the ocean and take robots and stuff and grab these aircraft and bring them back up. And so that's what they did. And once they bring them up, you've got to put them somewhere. And so at this particular location, there was a special hangar that they were doing some like side maintenance on, but it was extra space. And so they cleared everything out. It took two hangars, two big, huge helicopters, and they laid them all out piece by piece, side by side. And I was working with the person that was in charge of the mishap investigation, and we were walking through the debris, and it was very sad. It was very sad. It really affected the guy who was involved with it. And, you know, there's human remains and there's parts of aircraft and it's a mess. And you wonder what pieces are. And as you dive deep into the discovery portion, like it's just wild to think about. But also one of the things, the saltwater thing was so interesting because we're walking around and all of a sudden you hear click, 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 clack. And these loud clicks and clacks. And I was like, what the hell is that? And it was the fact that the rotor head was made of magnesium. And once salt water gets into magnesium, it starts a chemical reaction that can't be stopped. And so there's this, like, the chemical reaction breaks down the magnesium. So the rotor head at some point will just be dust. And so there's this clock that they have to race against to develop, to identify all these magnesium pieces and look at them and capture that data before there's nothing left. I was like, it blew my mind. Like I just all the things that you don't even think about with mishaps and just how deep you can go with it.
That's a really great point, Nick. I've actually lived on that boat and done recovery from deep water ops. And the Mudsu divers are some of the best in the world and outstanding, amazing guys. And when they hit that ground, well, I guess it's not really ground, it's the water, but
there's eventually ground.
Eventually, right? So it's 24-hour ops. And they're down there and you're watching their feeds and you're telling them, no, go here, look at that. I need you this get first. And they are just top notch. They will get everything and they just bring it up. And then it's on us to take care of it. And oil helps to slow some of these down. But to your point, there's environmental concerns. Some countries don't want you to, spray oil on the deck of a boat, it gets into the water. But I personally scour the wreckage when it comes up because you do want to be sensitive towards HR, human remains, and get everything you possibly can to return to the families first and foremost, and then start doing some initial look. But at that point, it's just this chunk, you have to get it to the hangar and then start tearing it apart to get to the pieces and go, hey, that one's not right. And it's a tough situation, but the clock is ticking. And it's very strange when you move pieces and there's fish in there, crabs, things like that. And you're like, surely this wasn't in there before, it hit the water, but you just have to have a little bit of a dark sense of humor.
There's a largemouth bass in this plane. Okay. So one of the things you talked about was sending pieces to engineers and to OEMs, to companies, to have them research. Talk to me about why you would do that.
So it may not look like it, but I am not an engineer. So,
well, you went. Wait a second. You went to Mississippi State. You're clearly an engineer.
Clearly, I was there a very long time. First of all, and I got a bachelor's in communications.
Perfect.
the ultimate degree. But I became a pilot, and so now I know everything.
See, that's how we roll.
It's very complex how these things are put together, and as a rotary wing guy, for example, helicopters are different, obviously. A Chinook is not the same as an OH-58, which is no longer being flown, which I'm sad to say. A lot of helicopters I fly are now on poles.
We're getting old, bro.
Anyways, my birthday was like 2 days ago, so yeah, I'm feeling it. The fixed wing world is, an F-18 obviously is different than everything. So they send these generic guy out and go, just figure it out. And so you take what you know and you bring these reps in and you go, hey, is that right? Because I've seen enough gears to know when a gear tooth is broken, something is wrong with that.
Yep.
I don't have to have a PhD in any, electromagnetic theory or whatever to look at something and go, that's not right.
Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Also, you can join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance and strategies for professional pilots on the brand new Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. There's this guy named Ivan in the Navy who teaches the engineering class that he does an entire class about how metal breaks, the different ways that different materials break. Yeah. And it was a week-long class. And it was just so intense, especially because in the safety school, they take everybody. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or a business major or communications major or a theater major, they take pilots and put them through this intense course. And Ivan would bring up these pictures from mishaps and say, how did this break? What caused this to break? Did it break torsionally? Did it shear? Did it do this or that? And one of the coolest tricks he would do was he had this piece of chalk and he would grab the top and grab the bottom and he would twist them like he was unscrewing a cap, and it was a torsional break, right? So it was brittle. Chalk is very brittle, right? So, and it would have this cool spiral to it as it broke. And then he would take a helicopter rotor head and show you that, like, hey, this thing departed the head because the mast like torsionally broke and had the exact same break as the piece of chalk. And all of those, it's interesting, those little telltale signs that you see, or some kind of like fissure or fracture, or, where the metal fatigue could happen if it's been bent multiple times. And that is super cool. The most interesting part is looking at some kind of modern jet. I remember we have a crash lab, which was super fun. I'm sure you guys have a crash lab, which is a bunch of crashed aircraft in a large area, and they bring you through and they have you investigate the crash. And one of the aircraft that they have in this crash lab is a Blue Angel that had crashed, and they have it laid out and you have to walk up to it and look at it. And one of the things about the F-18 is it's got tons of carbon fiber. And so there's like carbon fiber breaks, like it's a hot mess. It's like, it's this web of just terrifying pokiness it's like a porcupine that's going to get you. And so all of these structures like fail in different ways. That's so interesting to me. How do you look at that, and how do you manage that, and what like I don't know, what things do you have that can help you understand that better?
When you walk up to a mishap airplane or helicopter, you may have just a mound of molten metal, or you may have, something deep in the water that's in 1,000 pieces. And so once you start bringing that up, once you start pulling that in, that's when you can look at it. And I should have showed you my kit, but one of the things I keep in my kit is this little book right here, the Aircraft Accident Investigation book. And obviously this is my old one. There's a new one, but I could keep all my notes and things like this in here. And it's a handy reference that just says, hey, steel melts at this temperature, magnesium melts at this temperature. It's got great visual reminders of when I'm looking at something that's torsionally broke, I can verify that off of just looking at that. It's just a handy reference tool for me. Now, where I'm at in my career, to your point, you could just look at these things and go, hey, this thing came apart this way. I can look at the cupping in there. I can look at, all the, there it is. See,
the words.
Old habits die hard, right?
All the words.
But when I'm dealing with new guys or board members who have never done anything like this, I could pull out my book and I'm like, read this tonight, read this section about fire, and then come back and talk to me tomorrow. And most of the time they come in and they go, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And now we start pulling people together to see that common picture, because fire, it leaves that soot pattern. And was this a flash fire? Was this a long burning fire? What's melted around it? How hot was that fire? And sometimes when things get torn apart, the way that aircraft are built nowadays, there's just wiring everywhere, and fuel lines and hydraulic lines and all the things. And it just takes that spark, even if it's not from the wiring, it's just from the metal coming apart. And now you got a fire. But that could be a red herring to a different problem. And so now you got to spend time analyzing the fire. Also, black boxes can survive a fire. And a lot of people, they look at these melted things and they're like, but with enough digging, if you look at a helicopter that's crashed and it's pancaked out, like an Apache, for example, where they keep the black box is in the forward left compartment there where the pilots kind of crawl in. So if I could orient myself to that, I could just dig into this molten stuff, and it's full of carbon fiber. It's full of all these things. And so you got the respirators and Tyvek suits and all the things, and you dig in there and you'll pull it out, and you'll be like, wow, I can't believe this thing survived.
Yeah.
Nothing else did. And then you ship it off. Yeah. There are ways to take molten chips, and they will actually microscopically, like down to the electron level, clean them, and they will pull that off. It costs about $25,000 an hour, but I'm not paying for it.
Yeah.
And so I'll get my data.
I need that. I need that as my side hustle. I need to get an electron microscope. You brought up a good point about the fact that the people that are helping you may or may not have any experience doing this, and that you have to train them. But it's many hands make light work as long as people are patient and careful, right? But you are kind of the ultimate circus master, trying to have all these people do things that they've never had to do before, to be able to help come to some kind of conclusion. And that's the same with your board too, right? You have people that evaluate that have never done it. Is that a difficult avenue to go down?
That's extremely difficult. Nick, you said it earlier. A unit loses some folks, and that's catastrophic. And now I'm going to pull a couple of guys off of there to now evaluate and listen to recordings of the final moments of a team or two pilots out doing gunnery or whatever it is. They also are being rated and evaluated by these same bosses that may have produced a culture that is, very loose. And so they accept a lot of risk unnecessarily. And now you're talking about, we're going to have to broach this with a 2 or 3 or 4-star general or the secretary of whatever, branch of service it is. And they get briefed on this as well. And so that guy still has to live and eat there.
Yeah.
And so there's hesitation a lot of times.
Yeah, I have certainly seen experiences where people have been rehomed in different squadrons because of some difficulties from a mishap investigation. And so that is certainly a thing to deal with, and it requires grace, and it requires compassion as you're going through it. And some people also can't do it. Some people just cannot bear the emotional trauma that they'll experience through it. So it's a real thing, and counseling is a real important part of that as well.
It's extremely important. I worked a recent mishap, and I still check in on the folks that were on that board. And there's several of them that everybody is talking to somebody. I've got a member of the team that's had to now start anxiety medications, and and it just goes on from there. But at the end of the day, I believe that the folks that do this are there for the right reasons, and it's really to honor those folks who may not have made it through there. It's also to keep us alive. They say that emergency procedures are written in blood. They mean that. And in the Department of Defense, we have a lot of shared airframes, and you'd be almost surprised that they could have different emergency procedures, different caution notes and warnings. But I'm not operating a helicopter 300 miles off land trying to land on a little tiny moving dot. I've got the luxury of 1,000 divert airfields and just open fields here. And so there are different considerations to look at.
Well,
when I investigate, I try to keep those in mind and say, am I looking out for my brothers and sisters in the other branches too?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, if you decide to go to the airlines, you will find that you'll fly a 737 or an Airbus 320 in 3 different companies, and they fly them completely differently, and they got all different procedures, and it's wild. It's the exact same aircraft doing the exact same mission, if you will. It's bananas. But one of the things you mentioned was how they, the emergency procedures are written in blood. And it's a very strange experience to have a mishap happen in a squadron, and then like a year goes by, and then an update to the manuals comes out with those changes that were from that mishap. And it really, the first time that happened, it really brought it home to me, because it always seemed like it was really far off, and that it was just like that happened in the past, and that past is way gone. But then all of a sudden it happened in the present where I was. And it was very, very impactful, and probably, changed a lot of my perspective in how I handle myself in the aircraft, and the seriousness at which you've got to kind of step into it.
Aviation is an inherently dangerous business, and it seems cliche to say, but in those deliberations, that second phase, some of the most intense deliberations I've participated in or witnessed are when pilots are now talking about an update to an emergency procedure, because you don't want to be in another pilot's cockpit and allow some freedom to maneuver and figure out your own problems. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to literally lead that horse to water and go, no, this is what you're going to do now, because you had the chance and we didn't do right, or we found out that this is in the wrong order, unfortunately. And so now you have to be in that guy's cockpit and say, this is how it needs to be done from now on. But this can be pretty intense because, as you know, like, I'm a competent, great pilot. I don't really need you to tell me how to fly.
I don't know if I would call myself that, but most pilots for sure.
Well, especially if you're single pilot, right?
That's right. The best pilot you've flown with. Talk to me about the board. All right. So we do the mishap, the initial not findings. Like we do collect the data. We collect it all. We've done that. We've sent it off to the labs. We've gotten the reports back from the labs that say, hey, this is nothing or this is something. And and then you have this information, but then you have to sit and deliberate and sit down in a group. Who are the people that are members of that board and where do they come from?
Excellent question. The board is typically comprised of like a flight doc.
Okay. Like a flight surgeon. Okay.
Yeah, a flight surgeon. I apologize. You also have a human factors person that's going to be like an aviation psychologist or a psychiatrist, somebody who's got that upper level training on thought process.
Yep. Okay.
You're going to have a pilot member.
Okay.
Depending on the airframe, you may have a crew member. You know, you'll have a board secretary or a recorder. You'll have the board president. And then if you need any other specialties from there, then you request them in.
Hey, pilot, does your pilot uniform make a short flight feel like a transcon slog? Flight uniforms have reinvented aviation shirts with 3D stretch, stain repellents, and no wrinkles. These shirts are just plain comfortable and ready for takeoff right out of your rollerboard. Flight Uniform is trusted by more than 25,000 pilots, and their flagship flight shirt has over 1,500 five-star reviews. I've worn every pilot shirt out there, and if you know me, you know I only wear flight uniforms. Be the envy of every cockpit at flightuniform.com and get a special podcast exclusive discount with the code SpitfirePod20 to take 20% off your first order at flightuniform.com. Okay, so specialties would be like an engineer, or specialties would be a maintenance person, or what? Give me some examples.
Maintenance, engineer, you'll need all those people to kind of go through there. And in fact, a maintenance guy would be a voting member of the board. Anybody who I bring into a board who's extra than that, they're a non-voting member. They're there to provide that subject matter expertise to the rest of the board. So if maybe they're carrying some special equipment and I don't know anything about it, then I'm going to need somebody who knows how to do that. Or maybe it's an airfield operations guy. And because when I listened to the tower tapes, I heard some things that were not quite right. Now I need somebody to come in and tell me, is this right? Or I don't need their vote, but I need their information.
Yeah. And that brings up a really interesting point. If you have some top secret gear on board, or you are doing a mission that you're not read into and you have to go down that path. Oh my gosh. Like, talk about, geez, dude, that's so wild.
I'm fortunate. My clearance is I'm good to go.
Yeah.
No problem. However, I have worked some mishaps that will never see the light of day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, if there is something, there's a certain level of, so you have this board that's comprised of these people. In the Navy, we also have a safety center that is it's the bat phone that you can pick up to call just in case, like, hey, we're going down this path. Either we're at an impasse, or we have a question, or we don't know what to do. And the Navy, their safety center is it's got active duty members, but it also has these civilians that have been doing it for 40 plus years, and that have been they've seen it all. Like, since hey, we got our first helicopter in the Navy, and here we are today with, 60s and 53s. But Do the other branches also have that kind of reach back?
This is, I thought about this a little bit. I figured this would come up.
Oh,
The Air Force has a safety center.
okay.
And when you have a Class A, or, especially with a fatality.
And to clarify real quick, a class, like there are three, now there's four, I guess, classifications like A, B, C, and D based on like whether it's expensive or whether somebody dies. A Class A is like a death or over a certain threshold of money, which is not a whole lot.
$2.5 million.
$2.5 million, which is like you blew a tire and there you go. So
pretty close.
Yeah.
Just the gun on the front of an Apache is over $1 million.
Yeah. Wild.
So anyways, enough about all that. Yeah. So we have a safety center in the Air Force. They will send out a rep and he'll be on your board, or she, or, they'll be on your board. They'll live with you, they eat with you, and they're there to advise the board the whole way through. The Navy, obviously, the same way. The Army sends out the board president and the recorder, which is typically a W-4 or W-5.
Okay.
Sometimes a W.
So they send it out from a safety center?
That's correct. They'll send it from the Combat Readiness Center. So it's just a big room. Everyone's got a cubicle. It's and a big table in the middle. And we just meet and we review each other's mishaps. And, we train and try to stay on top of it. But the Army sends the leadership to the board and starts that process. So
I see.
So there's less reach back that way.
Do you have to bring your own Zens when you go?
There's typically plenty of it available.
Yeah. Things have changed. I've upgraded to Zens from Copenhagen in my conversational tone with Army guys. So, or any military guy or gal, really. Apologies. All right. So these deliberations, it's not like 2 or 3 days, right? It's got to take a while.
It depends. It really depends. Like we were talking about at the beginning, each member of the board has their little pet rock. And when I brief a board, I'll say for deliberations, check all your knives, guns, brass knuckles. I want all of that needs to stay out today.
Yeah. Today
is the day that we're going to go into Thunderdome. And we work through all of those pet rocks. And it can be pretty brutal. People get their feelings hurt.
Meaning like, hey, one guy thinks that the primary causal factors are, hey, this was bad maintenance. Or somebody says, no, that was pilot error. Or no, it was some other thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I am one of those people that when I go work at a mishap, I don't come from a place of, let's go get those pilots.
That's how it feels. Let me tell you.
It does.
Yeah.
It really does. What's a shame about that? You don't hear about all the near misses that a pilot actually saved an aircraft.
Yeah, sure.
Because he was there, present, made the right choice, and got it on the ground, and everybody was good to go.
I've had a few of those.
Banged it up.
Yep.
But he got it there.
Yep.
We only hear about these bad ones. And it's the same thing, like you said, with maintenance. Now, was there a wrench in the engine when the pilot started the engine?
Right.
Now you've got a debate.
Right.
Who was wrong first?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because the pilot should have done a walk around. Should have seen that big old wrench right there. He said he did. On camera, he did. The wrench is right there. So, what happened first?
I think like you bring up a really good point for the airline pilots that are still listening to us. Like when you go do a walk around on a jet at an airport, there are cameras watching you do that walk around. So your eyes better hit everything, because if they don't and you're on your phone goofing off, like you're toast. So heads up. Just a quick side note for the airline bubbas that are with us right now too, because you're always with us. Good.
It's all about doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
When I download a black box, it's 100,000+ lines of just code and data.
Mm.
That's, a bazillion columns long. If I just scroll to the bottom where the data stops,
Yeah.
I could see all the lights that were on and what the data points were saying and work my way backwards.
Yeah.
So it's fairly easy to tell what was happening at the time. It takes a long time to learn those nuances, but you can just look at raw data and go, the fire light was on, but no one pulled the handle.
Yeah.
And then you talk to folks and they're like, yeah, I pulled the handle. I don't think you did.
Yeah. Or you see the ejection. I've been on a couple of boards where the ejection seat's been pulled and it was pulled like 0.2 seconds too late. And because it's not an instantaneous reaction, right? And so, yeah, all those things. In the Navy, this is my only basis for this, right? So in the Navy, if my memory serves me correctly, all you people in Pensacola at the Naval Aviation Safety School, like chill out if I'm wrong. But I believe that the board comes to the conclusion it's written up and it's pushed out. And then it has this chain that it has to go up for signature, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, right? They can't change it. They can just agree or disagree. And then they can write some comments. Is that how it works with y'all?
It's mostly the same process. That's that final phase.
Yeah.
We stand before the convening authority and you outbrief. You're showing your homework at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And I've been in one of the first ones I ever did, a 2-star general is listening to me and I'm going through my stuff and this was actually a maintenance issue. And he jumps up out of his chair and just goes, "What the F?" And I'm like, well, no, I'm fired.
Yeah.
That didn't take long. And, but when you find some of these things like a wrench and an engine, and then a pilot cranks it up and it destroys the engine and part of an aircraft, people just have a hard time understanding, how does this happen? So anyways, as the unit, everybody else gets to chomp on this. They can agree or disagree, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change. And it briefs all the way to the secretary of the whichever branch, depending on if it's Class A, especially with the fatality. And Congress gets involved, senators, everybody. But as a safety guy, we're very anonymous. It's really going to be the convening authority who is answering those questions.
Yep. And you've got the Freedom of Information Act only applies very limited scope of what you can actually do Freedom of Information Act for this stuff, right? But I also say, as it goes along the way, to my general officers that listen, I know you're out. I know you're listening. I'm talking to you. Like when you get an outbrief from a mishap report, like take a breath and pull your emotion out of it. Because I love my general officers. I have seen people lose their mind because of a preconceived notion of what they want it to be, or they whether media reports have tainted things or whatever. That just kind of is what it is. So give these people a little bit of grace. They've been working real hard trying to come up with this mishap report. And it's a pain in the ass to write too, because it's really long. It's really in depth. It takes forever. And you're like, you feel like you're never done. And then there's another mishap and you're doing that one at the same time. So yeah, all the information in there is privileged information, right? So that the good part of what happens, the reason we do these reports is to learn and to make ourselves better and to not repeat the mistakes of the men and women that went before us and to be a better warfighter. And so that information is shared with squadrons, and they're able to take that information and dive deep into to tabletop it and to talk deeper and think about a broader spectrum to make themselves better pilots. And that is probably my favorite part of all of this, because you get to, you are privileged enough to understand what happened and why. And then and then just have your brain expanded so that you can be better. And I love that part.
That's one of the most important parts to me personally, is to go to the units and talk to the users. Now, as a safety investigator, I don't have a lot of friends anymore.
Yeah. You still got me, buddy.
Yes. Thanks, Nick. Speaking of that airline job,
let's
talk later.
Listen, no sick.
But I heard that. The hardest thing to do is look at these guys in the eye and say, I have spent the last X number of months neck deep in every bit of this.
It's the dirty laundry.
This is what it is.
Yeah.
And you're showing your homework, you're airing the dirty laundry.
Yeah.
But it is to literally to make those users, those end users, safer, better people. And we all have families. I've been fortunate enough to be married for almost 20 years.
All right.
To an amazing woman. And she has put up with this career, and that I've missed every holiday. This is on top of deployments and everything else.
Yep.
And it's to go and help families have closure and keep other aircrew alive.
Yeah. I've been a part of too many of those experiences, and I'm so thankful that I somehow made it through, but I'm also thankful for all the things that I've learned throughout it. And that the mishap, if you have an opportunity, whether you are military or civilian, if you have a military opportunity to go do this, you'll never do anything more impactful. And then if you have a civilian opportunity to work with NTSB or any of the organizations that promote aviation safety, you just got to go do it, because it makes you so much of it doesn't make you better at flying the aircraft. It makes you better at thinking about flying the aircraft. And that's where the win is.
Absolutely. I hate that we learn so much from tragedies. I feel like, remember back in the day when you had the guy that had the close call, and everyone knows. Now he had to stand up at the monthly safety brief and brief, here's what I did. Here, I wasn't paying attention. I miscalculated fuel, whatever it is. And he had to present it to all his buddies. And everyone's like, man, that was close. I feel like we learn a lot from those as well. And I'd love to get more of that to civilian as well as the military pilots.
Yeah, for sure. It's important. And, this was a delicate conversation for me to thread because of the people that listen to my show that have been involved in mishaps, and I'm close with them. Their personal experiences are very, very personal. And I want to make sure that they know that experience is just very tragic, and there's nothing but love here. And I want to make sure that the people that listen to this show, the pilot that's listening, knows that they're like, this is how we do it. This is what the process is, but it's something that you can help. If you ever have the opportunity to help with something like that, you should put your hand up and you should help, as hard as it's going to be. But also be present to the men and women in your squadron when it does happen, because there's a lot of emotions. There can be a lot of fissures. There can be a lot of different things and a lot of hurt. It's more than just squadron level. It goes way deeper and way further. So think about that and keep that in mind, and lean hard on your chaplains if you need to. That's important. So, Patrick, yes. Thank you for spending your afternoon with me. Thank you for talking to the pilots. We're forever grateful that you would share some time with us and this important topic.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate all the pilots that are out there, and I appreciate what you do.
This is important. Before you go, you need to know that 2024 is going to be unbelievably competitive in the world of pilot hiring, and you need to make sure that you separate yourself from the herd. The only way that you can guarantee that you'll land your dream job is by partnering with Spitfire Elite Interview Consulting. We are the only choice for application review and interview prep. We are the partners that you've been looking for from start to finish, and it's never too early to be part of our community. Just go over to my website, spitfireelite.com, and use the coupon code R4P to save yourself 10% on all of our services. Again, that's the letter R, the number 4, and the letter P to save 10%. So go out there and slay your interviews.